Hi guys, it's Carl here. So if you're new to the channel, please give it a like and a subscribe and share if it might help somebody that you know. So when I started my own research around family estrangement back in 2018, and I was putting out a call for participants to take part in the research, I specifically requested people whose estrangement was greater than 12 months. The reason for this was to try and get a sense of if the experience of estrangement changes after an extended period of time. And it was very interesting because people came in who estrangement duration varied quite considerably. Some people, their estrangement was maybe 2 to 3 years, and others it was 10 years and over. And it did give some insight into how the duration of an estrangement, it can change the experience, but also the factors which influence those changes. But one particular person that was interviewed for the research, they said something quite specifically which stayed with me. And what they said was that had I put out the request for participants maybe 2 years ago, they wouldn't have felt comfortable talking about their estrangement. And their estrangement, that person was actually, it was a 2-year-old estrangement. So basically what she was saying was if it was too close to the initial point where that distance began, she wouldn't have felt safe discussing it, maybe just didn't feel comfortable with the emotions that it would naturally bring up. So it really just emphasises time was an important factor. And today's video, we're going to discuss time in terms of estrangement and really why it matters. So one way that time determined the experience was it really influenced how comfortable a person was engaging with support and just talking about the estrangement publicly. And I suppose it's understandable if it's still reasonably fresh and there's a lot of rawness around it, but also uncertainty around the status of the estrangement. So for example, if there's still chance of a reconciliation, I think it's natural that people would not want to talk about it out of fear of consequences of talking about it, of fear of maybe making the situation worse and reducing the chance of a reconciliation. So I think it's understandable in that case why someone would decide, like, I don't want to talk about this publicly. Another factor, unfortunate factor, is shame, and there's still a great deal of shame around this because estrangement really conflicts with our values around family and around society's values around family, and with that will naturally come a great deal of shame and a sense that there's something wrong with you. And it takes time to work through those feelings, and if the feelings are still fresh and if the estrangement is still fresh, shame may be prevalent, and that will really influence a person's ability to talk about the situation. Maybe they don't want to talk about it to anybody, and really that comes down to a fear of judgment, and that's a very human fear. I think we all fear that on some level, but particularly when it's a topic that's so personal and so painful. And so again, time is going to be a factor there, but time also gives us an opportunity for reflection and forming ideas about what happened and why it happened and when it happened. And as a therapist, I'm always trying to honour my clients' wisdom, their own reflective process and the conclusions that they've come to. And so I need to know how long the estrangement has taken place. It gives me a sense of they've really had a lot of time to work through all of this and come up with their own answers. And to me, you know, even though we constantly hone down that reflective process and we work through their conclusions, it's good that they've had that time to do it, because if it's only been a year or even less, they may not have had the space to really work through in any great depth what they think has gone to or has happened between them. But time, interestingly, is often a bone of contention within families or within estrangement. And I've seen families argue over how long they've been estranged or argue over when the estrangement happened, which may be just another expression of the family dynamic and the dysfunction that exists that led to the estrangement in the first place. And those power dynamics that happen where someone has to win, someone has to have the last word, and they're just using time as another topic to instigate a row or a conflict or any other issue that's happening. But often time is very hard to nail down. And it's particularly if the estrangement has actually gone on for an extended period of time, maybe decades, we might lose our sense of time, a sense of when this all began, or even our why. And that's the reality for some people, especially if they're carrying a great deal of trauma. Time sometimes freezes when we're in that place, and it's very difficult to get any sense of time or what happened. But also, if the estrangement there's very little communication around the estrangement, in terms of if you haven't been explicitly told that we are estranged, then there may be no point of demarcation from when you weren't estranged to when you were estranged. So then again, people's relationship time becomes quite confusing because you're not quite sure when it happened. And again, that uncertainty and that confusion is part of the therapeutic process. At least we know that's something that we need to work on. Whereas if we have no sense of time and no sense of that there is no time, we don't discuss time at all, we don't get to add that to all the different factors that contribute to an estrangement, but also contribute towards recovering from estrangement and that healing process. So now the expression time heals all wounds, it never sat well with me, because I found personally, and I found with all my clients, is that everyone is so traumatized by this experience and so caught up in the pain of estrangement that they don't get to move forward. And in essence, time almost freezes. And again, there's reasons for that. As I just said, trauma is an obvious one. And what we've learned now is that trauma, it's a physical construct as much as it is psychological, and it leaves a somatic imprint. It stays. It doesn't go away. Even as time passes, the trauma remains. And what that indicates to me is that it's more than just time that helps people to heal. It's a component, but they also need support. They need the right resources to work through their distress. They need the right environment where they can feel safe enough to start to integrate traumatic experiences in a healthy way, in a way that really connects with the body as well as the mind. Without those things, then time on its own just simply isn't enough. But also another aspect is the nature of the grief around estrangement. And the reality is that the people that you're estranged from, or the relationship that you're grieving, these people could be 10 minutes down the road. They could be the end of a phone if you just pick them up, but you know that you can't ring them, or you know you can't visit them. So the grief, it's a complicated one because it doesn't get to happen naturally. But also the fact that we live in a society that doesn't understand estrangement, so you can't express your grief naturally. You don't have the traditions of a funeral because the person is still alive, and yet the relationship may never be the same again. It may be completely fragmented, completely destroyed. So again, that keeps people stuck because they don't get to grieve naturally. And we're meant to grieve if we've experienced loss, which is what this is. Even if you see the people, even if the relationship status may change later on, the estrangement has happened. That you've gone through an extended period of time where these people are not in your life, and you have every right to grieve that, but you're not able to. Now, another aspect, estrangement brings with it so many complex challenges, psychological challenges, relational challenges, social challenges, that people are so caught up in survival, they don't even realise they're grieving. They don't even have time to reflect on grief. They're too busy managing everything else. And this is all about helping people step back and connect with the impact of it, more so than the challenges that they're trying to manage. But another aspect that keeps people stuck and keeps time frozen is the estrangement type. And what I mean is that, let's say the estrangement is emotional, which means that you see each other on a regular basis. You might see estranged family members, over Christmas, or even see them weekly if you're visiting somebody. And there could be a sense of obligation, loyalty, duty, which means that you're seeing estranged family members on a regular basis. But if you're still caught in the middle of the unhealthy dynamic that led to the estrangement in the first place, you may find that you're still emotionally stuck and you haven't been able to move forward and heal. And I found that with one of the participants who had been estranged probably 10 years from his siblings, but he still sees his siblings fairly frequently, and primarily because he has kids and he doesn't want his kids to be deprived of a relationship with their cousins. But he carries so much anger still because he's still spending time with family, and all the irresponsible behaviours and all the passive aggressive remarks and all the other attitudes that existed in the family, they were still present. He was still exposed to it, and he wasn't able to pull back and actually heal from it. So in his case, time was a factor, but he didn't have the other support, he didn't have the resources or even the ability to create the distance that he needed to heal. Now, every estrangement is different. That's a voluntary estrangement. Yours may be involuntary. Okay, you may have no choice over this. So equally, you're going to be just as stuck emotionally because you haven't had space to grieve, you haven't had space to understand what's happening, you haven't had space for someone to even validate your pain. Again, you may be caught up trying to survive all these dynamics. So people remain equally stuck, frozen in time, irrespective of whether the estrangement was voluntary or involuntary. But the estrangement type might play a part. So the purpose of this video and the work that I'm doing is emphasise all the different components that make an estrangement, how they interact, how they influence each other, and how we need to acknowledge these for us to move forward and heal. But for me as a therapist, time is important because it gives me an indication of how long a person has struggled with this situation. And if it's a year, that's going to be tough. If it's 10 years, it wears people down, it causes a lot of internal confusion, distress, and that needs to be validated, it needs to be heard. But the other side of it is that it also helps me see how strong the people are, because people are much more resilient than they realise. And even after a year, an estrangement is very difficult, but even after 1 year of it, it's a huge deal of uncertainty. The inner world can be incredibly chaotic. People are still here. They're still doing their best to move forward, to get on with their life, to hold on to the relationships with people they're not estranged from, to hold on to their career, hold on to their health. There's a great strength that comes with that, and that equally needs to be validated. And I will do that. I'm always trying to find my clients' strengths, always trying to find the natural resources they have to work through their difficulties, and just keep moving forward despite this really difficult and painful situation that they find themselves in. So I want you to just take the time, think about the role that time has played in your estrangement. Think about how long you have been estranged and how long you've had to carry, but also the factors which are influencing time and that inability to get a sense of time and to move forward in life despite this estrangement. And as I said, estrangement is just one of 7 components. And the other 6 I'm going to be discussing. I've already discussed the workshop I'm hosting on the 14th of November called Mapping Your Estrangement. I will be talking about time, but I'll be talking about time and how time is influenced by the other 6 factors that contribute to an estrangement. And the goal, again, is to try and get a better overview of the estrangement, hopefully get more clarity, and maybe help you communicate your estrangement in a much more effective way, because it is difficult to make sense of. It's very difficult to unpack all the factors that led to it, and it's very difficult to express that in a healthy way and in an effective way where people can understand. And hopefully after that workshop you might have a better sense of that. So click the link below in the description. You'll see a link to the workshop. Sign up, tickets are going pretty fast. It's happening in about 3 to 4 weeks. You're all very welcome. I'd love to see you there, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Take care. Bye bye.